In this video, we hear from Maureen DeLonghi, a teacher using iAchieve, on how she plans an iAchieve lesson.
Before starting to embark on the course, it's just so important to plan. I think in the past, one of the failings of some teachers was that they just thought, well, if I just start working through the resources, that's fine. Which is fine because you will cover the curriculum, but you have to be so aware of when the NCFE assessments are, because those are not set by iAchieve. Those are set externally by NCFE, and if you don't hit those dates, your students will not pass. So you really do need to plan when you're going to be teaching and what you're going to be teaching and how long you can spend on different sessions. And of course, that's going to also depend on the nature of your curriculum setup. If you've only got 2 lessons a week, you're going to have to whiz through some things quite quickly, whereas if you've got 5 lessons a week, you can take your time. And also, presumably, you will have some students who are more able, some who are less able, some who will be special needs. So you're going to have to control the pace of the lessons for them, depending on the students that you have.
So I'm taking the key concepts and themes, the sort of building blocks of the subject. I've already outlined them, and I'm now looking at how I'm going to embed these into the lessons. The planning is then centralised so that it can be led by the aims and the outcomes. If we've got more than one teacher teaching the same thing, collaborative planning is really useful, or because we've already outlined exactly what we want to have taught each week, different teachers can plan different parts of the lessons, so it takes away some of the burden on one teacher. It doesn't have to always be the same teacher that's doing it, and it makes sure that all the students, regardless of which teacher they have, will have access to that same knowledge. And then I find it quite important and quite useful to write really detailed, explicit plans, because regardless of what the current conditions are, maybe at the moment all the students are in class, but they might not always be like that. And by having it really clearly written down on a lesson by lesson basis, I can then make sure that those in class have exactly the same as those out of class. It actually removes a lot of the stress levels that we have if we really plan ahead, because then we know what materials we need to download or what resources we need to put into Google Classroom, or if we need to book the computer trolley, all of those little minutiae that make everyday teaching quite stressful. So if we've got a map that we can work from, it sort of takes away some of that stress. So what I've put on here is just a little snapshot of my curriculum map to show you how I've planned mine. So you can see that down the left-hand side, I've put the dates of the term. And then the bits that are there in red, well, those are days that I cannot do anything about. I can't change those. The students aren't in school, or we have a search day, which is like a drop-down day, or we have an inset day, so there's no students in school, or we have internal school assessments, so there are no lessons. Those I cannot change, so I know there's no teaching going to be going on then. Then the next column along is where I've split the times of the different lessons I'm teaching. I know roughly that I need between 1 and 5 lessons to teach each section. Sometimes if I've got lessons missing, I've had to take more lessons or add less content. Sometimes if there's nothing going on and I've got all my lessons intact, I can get through more. So I've literally gone through and I've spaced out the learning that I'm planning to give them on those dates. And then the other things that I've also added on there is when I want to have assessments. So I've marked in red the external assessment. Now, students doing the NCFE courses can have 2 attempts.
I think it's a really good idea, and I definitely think everyone should be putting their students in for the first attempt. Not necessarily expecting them to pass, but at least giving them a chance to have an attempt at that external assessment for that Unit 1, have external feedback, and then use that as a planning tool to prepare for their second attempt. And I'm also linking that in with their home learning, and I'm using a lot of the iAchieve extra resources there, fitting those in with the different teaching sessions so that the students can be working on stuff at home that I know is going to support their learning.
So I've put that in, that's where we're marking, that's my sort of end goal for that part of the term. But I've also put in there some practice assessments that I'm going to be doing in the interim. So I'm building towards that first attempt at the external assessment. And I've also put a column in for homework so that I know exactly what I'm expecting them to learn or revise or to hand in. The bits that are in pink are things where I know there's something they had to physically hand in, and the rest of it could just be reviewing sessions, and I'm telling them exactly which sessions, which bits of those sessions that I want them to cover.
I've based this almost entirely on the health and fitness course, but obviously the other courses are slightly different and there will be completely different dates and completely different content, but the principles will be the same.
So this is obviously only a snapshot. This just takes a few weeks, but I've done this for the whole year and I've mapped out week by week, half term by half term, term by term, exactly what I'm planning to teach. And then once I've got that, I get to the next phase, which is the day-to-day lesson planning. So this is an example of one of my lesson plans. So I've got quite clear timings on the sides that I like to stick to. And then you'll see there's two columns. I've got one column for what the children are doing in the lesson with me. So that's the in-class learner activity. But then I've got the online learner activity, and that's for what if they're not in school? What if they've been sent home? What if there's a reason why they cannot be in the classroom? So they're all doing the same, but they're doing it in a slightly different way.
So our school has a silent do now, that's compulsory, all lessons have to have one. So what I've used here is a little bit of revision. I've used this as an opportunity to go back to the previous session and do a bit of revision on the skeletal system. I actually used that, that's taken from the resources, and the students had to then label that themselves using their notes if they wanted to. I could do it as an open book or a closed book. I think this was an open book. And so I took away the labels, they relabeled them, and it was quite a nice little way of just starting the lesson with them in silence, but focusing on some learning that had gone before. And then we went through that with the green pens, and it was quite a sort of a settled start to the lesson. So I'm now looking at the cardiovascular system. That's the brand new topic. Most sessions on the iAchieve platform start with this Think First activity. And the way that I use this is from the front. So I type in the notes, the students can, I can either cold call or get them to just give me suggestions. And we use this for adding notes, putting this at the front that the students can then kind of just think about what they already know and try and draw on prior learning. They've all done science, for example, so lots of this will come from science. Some of them have knowledge of their own because they belong to sports clubs and stuff, and so a lot of the information for this health and fitness course they already have. So this is from the front, but I know that in some groups where I've got some students that perhaps have got special needs and just won't volunteer thoughts and answers, they work a lot better perhaps just with their TA, just in a smaller group. So I often will do a small brainstorm individually with one student and their TA, or with a small group of students, and they can do this in their little group first and maybe then feed back to the whole group. So obviously different ways of presenting that same thing but achieving the same end. These are some online brainstorming and mind mapping tools that I've found online. I know lots of people use these in loads of different lessons in my school, and they all absolutely swear by them. I haven't tried them all, but there's quite a few of them there. Have a look at them, see if some of them might suit your students. So then the next session, I'm just starting to teach. So I'm presenting from the front. I've got my screen up on the board, and I will interact with the students either through cold call or question and answer. So I'm going through the materials now with them. I don't need to create a new PowerPoint or anything. This is all there for them. Now, what I'm showing you here is screenshots, because I didn't want to risk the internet going down and everything being ruined. So these are just screenshots, but when you're using these in the classroom, when you click on these blue sections, that then takes you to more information or more detail. So for example, if I clicked on the one that says the heart, it opens up this screen, and this gives me more detail, so I can talk to the kids in a bit more detail about the heart. If they're working on their own, this is where they will be able to update their notes, get more information. I'll show you in a minute how I did the next phase of this lesson, and that enables them to work interactively. You've also got further down on the screen that diagram. So this is what I would use then for my do now for the next lesson. But at the moment, I'm just showing them this as a teaching tool from the front, and I'm taking them through it, and then they will look at it in more detail on their own. So that's my introduction, and that's my sort of 10-15 minutes worth of introducing them to the content. So the next section is where I want them to go back through the content I've just taught them. I just want to check that there's no misconceptions. I want to make sure they've understood it. And so they're working back at their own desk, and I'm just circulating, and they can log in, or they can work on some other activity that I've given them. That was the first sort of 15-20 minutes or so, and then I want them to work on those resources on their own. So the students all have their own login, and I want them to go back to their computers and go back through exactly what I've just shown them, but I want them to do that on their own. Now, we all know that if you say to a student, work on stuff at their own pace, that can, how long is a piece of string? So at that point, I would also give them some of these quiz questions. Now, these are all taken from the resources, so I've just downloaded them and printed them. And I've put this screen on there because I know that some people, had myself included actually initially, wasn't aware of where to find the extra resources that are in addition to the main online platform resources. So once you've logged in, if you click there, that will take you to the extra resources. It looks like that when you first go in. And if you then scroll down, it takes you to pages of downloadable paper resources. So these are the ones for the health and fitness. If you keep scrolling, you've got the business, you've got the equality and diversity. There's lots and lots of extra things that are not directly linked to the screens, but that really support them. And a lot of these have been created by teachers in the past who've used them and have said, you know, that we can add them onto the platform, so we know that they work and we know that they're useful. So they're going back through exactly what I've just shown them on their own, but whilst doing that, also filling in these quiz questions. And all of that I've just taken from the platform, so I haven't had to make or create anything. And I know that I've covered the detailed information that they're going to need for their exam. Also, these are set out to look like exam questions. So by doing these little mini quizzes and extra materials, they're actually preparing for the exam as well. Also in those resources are these, they're called handouts. Now they're brilliant if you've got students who are working independently and are quite able and can just go away, and they've got this then as a sort of a detailed summary of what I've already taught. But what I also find these really useful for is, because they're Word documents, you can use them for gap filling, for comprehension questions, you can use them for revision purposes, you can get them to cut them up and put them into the right order, you can do whatever you want with them, and they are a summary of everything I've said in a written form, and I can choose to use them in whatever way I know will suit my students.
And then finally in class, I would have a bit of question and answer just to check their knowledge and to make sure they've understood as a bit of a plenary
Activity.
If you need any further help and guidance, please contact us at info@iAchieve.org.uk.